Welcome to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams, where each fortnight you'll hear the stories of industry veterans and learn the secrets to sustainably amplifying value from your software platform investments.
They say that actions speak louder than words, but how do we turn purpose into action? Welcome to Platform Diaries. I'm Shane Williams. Today my guest is Rory Fitzpatrick, co-founder and managing director at ServiceNow professional services firm CloudGo. Rory and I will speak about the value of purpose and culture, autonomy, transparency, and Rory's approach to fostering a high-performance culture. I hope you enjoy the interview. Rory, thanks for your time and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Shane. Really appreciate it.
Mate, before we get into today's topic about purpose and culture, I thought it might be worthwhile just to give the listeners a little bit of insight into you and who you are. So, I've been having a quick flip through your LinkedIn profile and you've got a fair few big names on there from Microsoft and Cloud Sherpas. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your journey and then what prompted you to found CloudGo.
Yeah, thanks very much. So, look, I've been an entrepreneur since my university days. One day I'll tell you my Wiggles story, but now's probably not the time. And so I worked for a number of different larger organizations and really had a lot of fun at very entrepreneurial organizations like Cloud Sherpas, where I ran Asia for them. And when the company that I worked for was acquired, it just made too much sense to me. The market still looked like it needed good services partners. I was able to connect up with a co-founder who's just a genius in this space. I was able to bring the sales and marketing and operations capability, and he was able to bring the tech skills. And so it was just something that we really wanted to crack on with. So 1st of February was our 5-year anniversary, so we're very happy about that. When my wife, who's very supportive, asked me why I wanted to leave the security of a paid job at a large organization, my reply was, listen, I can't go to my grave not having tried. I've just always wanted to do these sorts of things. So, very excited that we're able to do this sort of stuff with CloudGo. Very excited about where we're at the moment and what we're able to go and create now with our team and with our customers.
Mate, almost sounds to me like an identical conversation when I left the corporate world. Or what do you want to go out and work on your own? And I think the answer at the time was very similar. It was, you know what? I reckon I can do this and I'll be kicking myself if I don't try.
Pretty much. Yep, you got to have a crack, right? And so we've had a crack and it's going well for us so far, and hopefully the same thing's going for you as well. Certainly seems to be from the LinkedIn posts I'm seeing from you.
Thanks, mate. Let's crack on. So, as you know, I'm writing a book and it's about achieving value from platform investments. And I've been thinking about how purpose and culture fit into sort of the context of platform teams and how that plays out in both large and small organizations. And I'm particularly interested in purpose at the moment because, I want to sort of understand how that manifests into material action in organizations and what measures the team can rally around to execute on. So, as you know, I'm a big advocate for autonomous teams. And I think there's a danger if you have a really aspirational purpose and fully autonomous teams, but you don't have any sort of clear objectives and measures, then you could end up not achieving much. And on the flip side, I think there's far too many larger organizations who lack a clear purpose. And so they massively overdo measurement. And where they end up is they just cripple innovation and, it probably provides less direction than some sort of aspirational purpose might. And so I think the answer is to have sort of a small number of measurable objectives without overcooking it?
Yes. Yeah, very much. I remember when I was at Microsoft and, at one of the kickoffs, they were talking about, these are something like 37 metrics or something that they had that they were measuring. And the guy up on stage said, I know you're thinking to yourself, how can we run the business on so few metrics? But believe me, these are the important ones. And I was sitting there going, that feels like a lot to me to try to measure the organization. It turns out that at that point in time, that was a lot. There was too much for the organization to consume. There's different pieces at different levels in an organization, right? Like when I'm running an all hands call for our team, I'm transparent, but I'm super clear about here's 3 things that you got to think about. And here's the 3 things that we're trying to do this year, this quarter, this month. And then below that, depending upon your role, depending upon the part of the organization you're in, there's going to be things in behind that. So I think being able to take your purpose and try to turn it into something actionable really is very context specific, and it's quite tricky to try to get that right.
And I think that's the key, right? If you don't have some sort of, I'm going to call it a hierarchy, but some sort of obvious leadership that's saying, you know what, this is the dial we're trying to turn, and this is how we want to achieve that objective. In other words, what are we going to measure? You don't want 50 measures. You probably don't want any more than 5 or 6 organizational level ones, but then contextualize it to the group and the geography and whatever makes sense.
Yep. I think humans can only handle a certain number of things in their brain at any one time, right? I think I read somewhere once that it was something like 7. I don't know whether that's scientifically true or not, but honestly, if you try to hold more than 7 things in your head at any one point in time, you're going to forget the 8th thing that pops in. And I think that has to be taken into account when you're trying to talk about your purpose and or talk about the things that you're going to do to try to execute on that purpose. If you've got too many, you're not going to be able to do any of them. If you're trying to be all things to all people, you'll end up failing. So it's got to pick the 3, 5, 7 things that you guys think you're good at, and then make that specific for your part of the group, right? Hey, we're focusing on ServiceNow over here, so here are the 5 things related to ServiceNow which tie back to these things at the group level.
And then I think where it becomes interesting is when you've got several groups all targeting the same metric. How do you make sure that they don't bake in dependency on each other when they come up with their plans, that they haven't necessarily socialized? So you don't end up with team A is dependent on teams B and C to achieve their metric, and B and C have no concept that that's coming, nor any capacity to pick it up and coordination of that across the group, so you don't end up with, oh, well, now nobody achieved anything because everybody was trying to juggle everybody else's priority.
But I think it's important in a larger organization that you are in some ways codependent on other parts of the business, because otherwise what's the point in you all being in the same organization, right? I think the key thing there, though, is about communication. And from my perspective, the only way to deliver a culture or a purpose inside an organization is to be very clear about your communication. So we've just started introducing quarterly business reviews, which a lot of American software companies do, and we're a services company, so this is kind of new for us. And we're still a relatively small organization, about 50 people, but being able to get sales, marketing, operations, delivery, everybody in a room, a virtual room, obviously, at the moment, but for everybody to come in and present about what they're trying to do and how they're trying to help the company deliver on its goals and its purpose was really useful, because it was like, wow, okay, it looks like we're going to be selling a lot up in this part of Asia. Okay, do we need language skills? What do we need to hire up there? Are there operational requirements that we're going to be having around currencies and those sorts of things and laws? And so therefore the organization was able to get behind that. But we have a very clear plan for this year in terms of who we're trying to become and the size of the organization and the value that we bring to our customers. And it's basically just boiled down on one slide, which everybody has now seen in our all hands, for example. And so being able to tie all of the conversations in the QBR back to that purpose about here's what we're doing this year. It was very simple about in terms of, well, that's great that you want to go and focus on that geography, for example, but how is doing that going to help you get to this end result? And that was really useful for everybody to be able to go, actually, I need to focus on these 3 other things over here, and that's why that's important. And to do that, I'm going to need help from marketing. I'm going to need help from delivery. I'm going to need help from our CFO, those sorts of things. So I think communication's super important, and how you deliver that, how you carry that in your heart, how you try to set some frameworks around that inside the organization. I think those are really important things to try to think about.
I think that's the key, because I think there's 2 ways to look at these things, right? One is there's going to be some work where your ability to deliver fast is going to be largely dependent upon you being independent and being able to deliver without being constrained by other groups and their capacity. But you're right. If you're going to leverage the value, if you like, of being part of an organisation where you've got multiple teams with specialities, then the key is going to be not creating those plans independently of each other. So you talk about that, all hands virtual get together and working through that plan together so that everyone's clear and understands who they're going to be relying on, what they need from each other, and can be thinking about, well, I know this is coming, this team's going to need my help, how do I plan for that? Versus independent planning, where you could very much end up, if you said, here's our purpose, all go away and decide how you're going to achieve it, and end up with these interdependencies that you have no idea are coming.
Yeah. And I've seen organizations be able to do that well, and others that will struggle. And I think the communication piece, again, is kind of the underpinning of it, because it's far too easy when you're at a high level inside an organization to end up with motherhood statements. And so how can you have something that is kind of actionable? Yeah, so I just see that communication's a big part of culture, and companies that have poor culture often have poor communication as well. And then you end up with too many meetings, too many emails, people playing politics and the like. Life's just much simpler when everyone's clear on what success looks like and are all heading in the same direction. And if you've got that culture, you're going to be easy to work with. You're going to get better results. You're going to be able to go home happy and have a relaxing weekend and not worry about what's on fire at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see some organisations that in some respects overcorrect in terms of communication and end up with, you talked about, too many meetings and things like that. I think about the organisations that end up with, we want inclusive and collaborative conversation, and that overcorrects to opt in to every decision. Everybody must be consulted. We must have a consensus on every decision. There's no more consultative decision making. It becomes consensus, and thus everything stops because everybody's entitled to an opinion on every decision, and everybody in the organisation must agree before we move. And so it just stifles. And it's interesting watching the organisations that go through that pain and the ones that manage to come out of it that end up with, what looks like some sort of decision-making framework as a mechanism that really sort of pulls them out of that inertia.
Yep. I think this ties back to something that is prevalent in the market at the moment, which is about the war for culture. And especially in the SaaS space as well, it's really hard to find good people. I always say for ServiceNow, it's hard to find, keep, train people who are good on the platform, let alone people that are going to be good inside your organization. And it's a very competitive market, and the people who are with us, they could be in lots of other places, but they've chosen to be at CloudGo for their own reasons, right? And I think a part of that is because we're super transparent in good and challenging ways. We take everybody through a culture presentation on day one when they join the organization. And a key part of that culture pack, which by the way is partly stolen from HubSpot, partly stolen from Netflix, and partly got a little bit of our secret sauce thrown in there. But part of that culture presentation is, we do not make decisions by committee. So the people that are tasked with making decisions will be the one to make the decision. You can have the input, but don't necessarily expect that, we're going to change decisions or change direction if you're not the person that's supposed to be making the decision. So that transparency is, good and challenging. Like we don't share our profit and loss or people's wages, for example, but most other things are open and transparent and open for discussion. And that culture means that we're also very transparent when we're working with our customers as well, in terms of talking about, running a workshop with a customer. Everybody has input, but then we have to make sure that we bring that back to what's important to you as a customer, and based upon our expertise as the people who know how to do this stuff, how we're going to help you get from where you are to where you want to be. And you can't necessarily do that by committee. You can have a workshop where everybody has input, but then you need to find the people who are going to be making the decisions and get them to make a decision about what's the way forward and what does success look like as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. And do you find sometimes you find really talented people who would be a great technical fit but have to turn them away just for culture fit?
Absolutely. And in fact, I just did that last week with some people. And I'm not saying that that's that in a mean way necessarily, but we have legitimately not hired people because we think that they wouldn't fit with our culture and purpose. we were interviewing for another sales rep up in Singapore, and the person whose CV stood out, I was very excited to talk to. And 15 minutes into the conversation, I had to ask her the question, hang on, wait, why do you want to join us? And she couldn't explain that. And for her, it wasn't necessarily about she was excited about CloudGo or excited about SaaS or excited about ServiceNow or excited about the problems we solve for customers. For her, it was about she wanted to get the next job. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, I don't think that we're going to be a great place for you then, because you need to want to be here. So I think it's super important. We have pretty low turnover. Not perfect, obviously. There are some people that we've had to take out of the business that haven't lived up to what we expected, and other people who have made various decisions for various reasons, but we've typically got pretty low turnover. And the people who are here are typically pretty excited to be here because we see them as individuals, and we talk a lot about why they want to be here and what they're trying to do as part of their career and part of their growth. So I just think culture is super important, and it's just helped us be able to stick together and get the sort of results that we have. Like, we grew 90% in 2020 in the middle of a COVID year. To have that sort of growth, and we doubled the team size, really comes down to the fact that, we've built a great culture. Good people want to be here. Customers recognize that, and they want to work with those sorts of people as well. And so when you're talking about like platform owners inside organizations as well, I think the same lesson can apply across, right? You're trying to deliver service to a customer, it may be an internal customer, but you need to be building a team that wants to be there, that is trying to do the sorts of things that you want to do, to make sure that you can continue to focus on the customer and over-deliver to the customer.
Absolutely. So when you're pitching to, let's say, potential employees, or you're demonstrating the value of your culture to, say, a client, how do you pitch that? Have you got like a purpose statement? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we have a purpose statement, which is, we will be the best partner to our chosen vendors and deliver business value. So we have kind of the marketing version of the purpose, but underlying the purpose is the culture. I think they're tied incredibly close together. And there's a saying that culture is a set of shared beliefs, values, and practices. And culture happens whether it's planned or not. So we deliberately say we're going to plan our culture. And for us, the non-public purpose is we're going to grow, have fun, and make money. Not necessarily in that order, but those are the key parts of who we are and what we want to do, and why people want to be here. Because when we're out delivering digital workflows that matter to our customer, we want to be having fun while we're doing that. We want to be doing interesting projects with interesting customers and learning new things, so we're growing. And of course, we're a commercial organization. Nobody ever went broke making a profit, and we need to be able to feed a number of families at the end of every month. So therefore, we need to be able to commercialize that sort of work as well. So those things really tie together, that our value proposition to customers and our purpose is around solving business problems with digital workflows that matter. But we're going to do it with some fun. We're going to grow. The customer should grow, and everybody should be able to see value for that time and that investment.
So while we're on the topic of culture, I think we've talked about purpose statements, but I reckon it's really interesting. You've been building a digital transformation consultancy from the ground up, which is, no small achievement. And a lot of that will be, as you build it, what's the culture look like and the purpose, and we talked about those. But I imagine you learned probably a few hard lessons along the way, but maybe taught you a few things about culture too, right?
A few lessons along the way, yes, one or two. Yeah.
So, I think it might be worthwhile just kind of bouncing into, how you think culture has played in the success of what you've done, and what are those lessons that you've learned to date?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, culture is an incredibly important part of our success. Once you get money out of the road, culture, I think, is kind of the next thing, right? So if we're able to pay our people properly, then there's a bunch of other reasons why they would want to stick around. So for us, it's why we get out of bed. There's a very competitive market to get talented people and to pick up customers as well. The previous company I was with, they still have Facebook groups of people catching up and doing that sort of stuff. And that was 5-6 years ago. So we're trying to create something like that, where people will look back and go, gee, I'm glad I chose to work there. And that was a good part of my career. And I really valued my time there. And, when we started CloudGo 5 years ago, actually 1st of February 21 was our 5-year anniversary, so we're very, very excited about that. We had a real inkling about what ServiceNow would be able to become, because, ServiceNow, people who don't know it might think of it that it's just an IT service management tool, where it's not actually. It's a business workflow platform that ITSM was just the first application they built on top. So people are more and more talking about digital transformation these days, and actually it means something, like the whole transition of the word cloud went through. People were defining cloud as a whole bunch of things, and now we're all kind of clear on what that means. I think digital transformation is going through that same process. And ServiceNow has been really well positioned to pick up on a lot of that at a lot of different customers, because it's all about trying to automate a business and move away from, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, hallway conversations, that sort of stuff. And especially with 2020, with COVID, it's been really interesting to see how digital transformation has gone and affected the market. My wife, who's a very wise lady, she says COVID brings out the truth. And we were talking about relationships, right? Like if you're in lockdown and you and your significant other aren't getting on, then that's just going to make it worse. But if you get on well, lockdown may have actually improved your relationship. And I think that there's a number of organizations where COVID has brought out the truth about how well they're doing or not. Now, obviously, there's some industries like airline industry or hospitality, for example, that have been horribly affected, and there's nothing about how good or bad they actually are. Nobody's allowed to go to the restaurant. Nobody's allowed to fly as much as they used to. So that doesn't apply there. But I think that the saying about COVID brings out the truth really does apply to businesses as well. And I think the culture of the organization is a key part of that. How much organizations are willing to invest in innovation and digital transformation, I think, is a key part of that. And just how resilient is an organization and how resilient their culture is to be able to deal with significant setbacks. There are some organizations that have done really, really well, and we're fortunate to count ourselves amongst that. There are other organizations that have struggled. And I think some of the things that play into that include culture and include how much an organization has driven down a digital transformation or innovation path.
And so that's an interesting one. When we talk about digital transformation, I think about how culture relates to transformation, particularly, we talked about earlier a little bit about purpose. And I was reading a book recently called The Loop Approach, and the author's names, I think, are Klein and Hughes, and they introduced this concept of purpose orientation. And they kind of hypothesized that, Tesla's core purpose might be, to accelerate the advent of sustainable transport, which, then lends itself towards creating these autonomous teams that could chase down things like advancement in battery tech or, reducing the cost of, car production. And I reckon there's something to this, but I mean, how much credence do you give this concept?
Yeah, I think a lot. It's a great notion. It's something that we buy into. I mean, people talk a lot about Tesla, but I think SpaceX might actually be the better example. They're not a rocket company necessarily. Their purpose, their culture isn't about putting satellites in orbit. They're trying to get people onto Mars, right? They're trying to give us plan B for another planet. And a purpose that big, people are going to be willing to go into bat for it. Now, we're a technology consulting company. We don't have a purpose that big, but we're about making people's lives better as well, solving business problems, making your day-to-day work simpler and easier and less frustrating, being able to get you the services you need when you need them so that your day is more enjoyable and more productive. And I really think that you can find purpose and meaning wherever you are. You don't have to be at a Tesla or a SpaceX. You can try to find some purpose and meaning in what you're doing and how you can try to do things better for people. Talking about books, you mentioned The Loop Approach. One of my favorite books is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Patrick Lencioni, who's a great writer. I've got this book right next to me at the moment as I'm talking to you. And I would strongly recommend anybody who wants to think about purpose, wants to think about culture, wants to think about communication and accountability and ownerships in teams, needs to go and get that book and needs to go and read it a couple of times. It's written like one of those parables, but, it's a very, very useful book. Strongly recommend it.
It's interesting. I read that, I reckon, it's got to be coming up to almost 20 years old. I read that a while ago, and there's a couple of things that stuck with me over time. And one of them was this, the amount of time that you waste when you're avoiding conflict. And I'm sure, I know I've come up against that before, right? Where you go, yeah, if we have this difficult conversation, that's going to be tough. But, how many cycles do you spin trying to work through that? And it's something that, as I got a little bit more mature and a bit older and thought, you know what, we just don't have time for this sort of stuff. We need to nip conflict in the bud, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was
actually, mate, sorry, I've just gone and pulled the book down to go and have a look at it. And yes, 2002, so very nearly 20 years old. So spot on you.
Mate, I still reckon it's pretty valid though.
Oh, very valid, because humans haven't changed all that much, right? And so being able to communicate, connect, inspire purpose, inspire vision inside people, but being able to, deal with conflict and get ahead of things early. We're very vigilant about that internally. And when we start seeing a few clashes, we kind of can pull people aside and go, what's going on here? Why is that happening? Look, you realize that this other person is responsible for these things. They're supposed to be doing that. Why are you getting upset about it? And just being able to take that culture of transparency and then be able to apply that to transparent communication, I really just think helps settle everybody down about, yep, this is my role, this is my responsibility. And I think it applies as well to helping grow the career of your people. I mean, if you're managing a team, people are always wanting to grow, get promoted, get better, those sorts of things as well. And so being able to have open, honest, early conversations about, well, if you're at this level and you want to go and do this, here are the things that you have to do. And we can be very clear about coaching you along that path as well. So those things all tie together, whether it's part of a team or whether you're dealing with internal stakeholders or whether you're dealing with customers.
It's interesting. I was just reflecting on that book, and granted, it's been a while since I read it, right? But I'm pretty sure it's this book. But I remember there was this concept that he brought up about a vulnerability exercise. If your leadership are dysfunctional, then personal disclosure exercise might be a good opportunity to sort of break that down in terms of showing vulnerability. And I remember thinking at the time, and I reckon I'm still willing to challenge it, is how realistic is that going to be? If you've got a truly dysfunctional team, and I mean really dysfunctional, to get half a dozen people to stand around and start personally disclosing in a group that's dysfunctional, is it really going to help or is it going to hinder? I don't know. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, trust is so important. If you haven't got trust, then you won't be willing to be vulnerable. So I think that work has to be done first about building trust for people to be able to be willing to open up on those things. So I think that there's some groundwork that's got to get done on that first before you can be truly vulnerable. The interesting thing is that being vulnerable can actually set you free in a lot of ways, because you're not having to think about what you've got to hide or how you've got to present yourself or what the politics needs to be around that particular thing. You can tell the truth and tell it straight and be open and transparent about it as much as possible. And there's some joy there with having that as well.
And that probably comes back to what we're talking about in terms of culture. Do you have a culture of transparency? Do you have a culture of and values that kind of encourage that level of transparency and openness?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're trying to talk about, encouraging high performance and those sorts of things as well. I think culture and purpose are incredibly important to be able to help set those things up, because then your people are going to be free to be able to do their best work, right? To be able to, if you're in the ServiceNow space, to be able to take that capability and talk to the business in their language and not necessarily just talk about the technology, for example, to make sure that the people who are with us are able to craft their careers with us. So we don't just hire someone and drop them in the box. What's the unique value that they bring to an organization, to the platform, to our customers? And how do we get the highest performance out of our team to be able to then pass that on to our customers as well?
And you would have worked with a fair few customers over the period you've been building this organization, right? So I'm wonder, if you're looking from the outside into those organizations, I imagine there's an obvious difference in the performance of the organizations who have a strong culture versus the ones who don't. Are they any easier to deal with, or do you achieve better results as a vendor when they've got it right?
Well, I don't think anybody's ever got it perfectly right, to be honest. I think the The times when we've got the best engagement at a customer is when we've built a stronger personal relationship with the stakeholders there. And so cultural alignment goes a long way, that we can talk the same sort of language and we can be transparent with each other about what success looks like for each of those. Other times are when, we've got strong executive leadership, but that doesn't always necessarily apply back to everything is going to be running smooth inside the organization. They may have a clear vision about what they're trying to do, but they may still need to grow their maturity around testing or around the development cycles or those sorts of things. So I think just being transparent about the different areas of an organization to be able to help drive maturity. If the culture of the organization is that they're willing to accept feedback and be open to those conversations, then typically you're going to end up with a better result and a happier customer.
Yeah, right. And so thinking about customers, if you were to offer practical advice to, let's say platform owners in the ServiceNow space, or, maybe platform owners in general, how do you go about fostering that sort of culture that encourages high performance? What's the practical tips?
I think focusing on your people and making sure that you're clear about why they are there and what they're hoping to get out of being there. We're super busy at the moment, so I've got people working late nights and working weekends, but they're okay to do it for now. They don't want to do it forever, but they're okay to do it for now because they're excited about what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go and the sorts of stuff that we're doing for customers. So I think you just need to be careful to try to match what you as an organization are doing, what you as an entity are doing, versus what that individual is there for. Because every organization in the end is just a collection of people, right? There are a whole bunch of individuals, and those individuals have to add up to become something greater than what the actual company is.
Mate, we've just about rolled up on time. If people want to reach out to Rory or to CloudGo, how do they get in touch with you, mate?
Yeah, sure. So we've recently just moved our website domain because we've opened up in the USA. So we've got a .com website now as well. So cloudgoservices.com. My email is just rory@cloudgoservices.com. Cloudgo.asia, cloudgo.com.au all work as well. We've got all the different domains. So, feel free to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. Ping me on there. My phone number's on there as well. If anybody wants to give me a call, more than happy to have a conversation and see how we can help.
Rory, thanks for your time and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Shane. Really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams. For more information or to contact Shane, please visit shanewilliams.com.au. Until next time, thanks for listening.